Just bear with me a second. I'll set this up. Okay, so I think I'm working. Okay, how are we all doing?
Good.
Good. Did you all come this morning, or did some? I came last night. Who came last night?
A few people.
Yeah, I needed that journey. 6 hours from Devon. Nightmare. Okay, I'm Jeff McMullen. I run a company called Pathfinder-UK. I teach tracking, wilderness living skills. I'm also a counsellor, and I work with people in nature. So some call it wilderness therapy, some people call it nature therapy. To me, it's about a connection with people in nature. So just really, before I kind of go into that, I want to just kind of thank the IOL for inviting me up here. It's something I never thought I'd have an opportunity to do, to try and tell my story. So I'm feeling a little bit nervous about that. So just bear with me as we go through it. What I'd like to do, as I share my story with you, because I was writing it down and I had pages and pages and pages of notes, and it was like, this is going to be a nightmare, So I just scrapped it in the end. I just made some kind of bullet points of what I felt were things that happened in my life that changed my direction and took me down this path to where I am now as a counsellor. And I'd like to invite you to come on that trip with me through your own experience, your own life experience. So if you can, if you've got a favourite place in nature that you have, that whether you sit there or you just kind of go for a walk there, if you can imagine yourself in that place as I'm speaking, and hopefully you will encounter part of your journey along that way, and see if there's any kind of relation or anything there that you can connect with, that where you've made a decision to change direction, or events have happened that have caused you to change direction and bring you to where you are today. So if you're able to do that, that would be great. So if I give you a little moment just to kind of reflect on that, and then we'll pick it up from there. So I have a very dry mouth.
There is bottles of water that people can help themselves to that, speaking of.
Okay, so my name's McMullen, as I said before. It means the bald one. All the men in my family are bald, or ish. I'm not. I'm definitely the exception to the rule on the black sheep. So while I've got it, I'm keeping it, and I'm making good use of it. If it goes, I'm going to do a Duncan Goodyear and get rid of the lot. Hopefully it won't go. I was born in Northern Ireland, Belfast. At the time, just before the Troubles really kind of kicked off. And that was, how can I say, it was an interesting time when I reflect back to it, because there was a lot of divide at that time. Certainly where I lived, when I went to go to school, I either went round a particular estate or I went through it. If I went through it, I had to pretend I was Catholic, which is quite difficult to do when you're being bombarded with loads of other stuff. So it was quite a challenging time. So my opportunity to get into nature was there. At the back of my garden there was a river and a park, and I used to go in there quite a lot. I used to catch sticklebacks and collect frogs and frog spawn. I guess like we all used to do when we were little. Not so sure if that's a good thing now. But that was my way of kind of coping with the situation that we were in. In fact, on one occasion I upset a bee special, which was our local police force, and my dad always used to say, never upset a bee special. I ran away with his jumper because he upset me, and he followed me and said, if you come one step closer to me, I'll throw your jumper in the river. He said, you throw it in the river, you follow it. And I did. And then he dragged me out, and then I got battered by my dad for messing with the copper, so not a good move. But my dad, in his wisdom, not quite sure what his reasons were at the time, but he brought us to England just before everything kicked off, which in my view was probably the best thing he ever did, because I feel for sure if I'd have stayed there, I would have been involved in the paramilitaries in some form or other, because that's just the way things were. And you can see it now on the news, how the kids are being sucked in, and any opportunity to throw bricks at squaddies or police is good fun. So we moved to England when I was about 9 or 10, and we moved over to Maidenhead, and I found it very difficult to settle down over here. I didn't really like it here, didn't want to be here, so I was always in trouble. I was always in trouble in Ireland, you know, so I don't sound Irish, do I? Great, isn't it? I wonder if it would work with an Irish accent as a counsellor. Right, where do you live? You know, I don't think it would work somehow. So I was always in trouble. I never got on at school. I wasn't a stupid kid, but I just didn't want to engage. So anything I could do to cause trouble, I did, so I could get kicked out. You know, I just didn't want to be there at all. I didn't learn to read until I was about 12. In fact, I remember that day quite clearly, which is a really cool story. My mum sent me to school with an old penny for lunch. Got to the class early. Teacher says, "What are you doing here, Molly?" "I've come for my lesson, sir." "Go away," or words to that effect. "You can read now." Ran home down this big hill to tell Mum because I was so excited. Fell over. Sorry, I lost my penny on the way to school. Fell over, and as I picked myself up, I found threepence. So I went straight down the sweet shop. It was great. So, but like I say, I was always causing trouble, and I was always in trouble. So I need to get rid of that one. I think this is me. So what happened was I was taken to see a counsellor. I'm going to use that phrase loosely because I wasn't actually part of the conversation that took place. I was just there. Everybody else talked about me and made decisions for me. And I was sent off to a boarding school in Gloucestershire. And I was saying to James last night, it must have been a good school, good boarding school, because it was approved by the government. You know, so. That was a very bad time, very abusive environment. But what happened there was that, you know, it was nothing short of teachers hitting you and punching you and stuff like that. So again, I would always get into trouble, because to get into trouble, what would happen is I'd have to go and see the principal. I'd be given the cat o' nine tails, which you couldn't sit down afterwards after receiving, but then I'd be sent into the garden to work with the gardeners. They would get me 10 woodbine, a bottle of beer or cider, and I'd be in the garden all day working with the gardeners, smoking the woodbine. And there used to be a little hole in the brick wall there where I used to hide it. And funnily enough, about 10 years ago, no, it might have been a bit longer, about 10, 12 years ago, I was up that way and I just thought I'd pop along. It's now a care home. And completely without thinking as I'm walking around the grounds, I went straight to this brick in the wall and looked inside for the woodbine, which of course wasn't there. But it was nice to see that that brick was still there, you know. But there was a teacher there, a German guy, not a very pleasant chap, but he was into birds. And he started a bird club, Young Ornithologist Club, and got me interested in birds. And I remember seeing my first ever woodpecker there. Woodpeckers are my favourite birds. I absolutely love them. So that was a green woodpecker. So I spent as much time as I could in nature. So I was always in trouble out in nature. Trouble out in nature. Not going anywhere very fast in terms of academics. So I didn't really learn a lot from that, other than having a good time in nature. Riding the horses without a saddle when I shouldn't be. Falling off, having them run over the top of me. It was a bit scary, but also fun at the same time. So shortly after that, I left. What am I going to do? I haven't got a clue. But I do illustrate. I don't do it much now. So I went to seek a place at Art College up in Ware in Hertfordshire, and I actually got into my amazement. So I spent a couple of years studying commercial art. Not much contact with nature at that time. In fact, nature kind of took a bit of a back seat because I guess I was just trying to find my way and sort things out in my head and trying to, you know, make some kind of living or something out of life. And I had no clue as to what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. So, just before I go any further, if any of you want to ask any questions while I'm talking, please feel free to put your hand up, and I'll take them questions, because I think it's really important if you do have something that we do that. So I went to Art College, didn't get on with it. I enjoyed the art side of it, but I wanted money. All my mates were out on the pop, you know, meeting girls, going to dances and stuff, and I wasn't, because I had no money. So I left, did pay for my exams but didn't take them, and basically just went from one job to another. I did about 9 jobs, I think, in a matter of a year. But back then you could leave a job, cross the road and get another job. It wasn't a problem. So there I am, sat in this factory one day, bending bits of metal, really kind of fed up with my lot, I suppose. So on impulse, I jumped on the bus at lunchtime, went down to Old Harlow and signed up for the army. Something I always said to my dad I would never do, because he tried to encourage me to do it. No, I'm not doing that. So I signed up for the army, and off I went. 22 years I spent in the British Army. My first confidential said that I was a black sheep and I would never make it. I left as a staff sergeant, and I was given an honour of a British Empire Medal in the New Year's Honours List for setting up a nature reserve in Germany. The army for me, I would have to say, was probably the best thing that actually happened to me, because it did allow me to sort myself out in more ways than one, I might add. So while I was in the army, what did I do? Well, I served in Northern Ireland, which is kind of might be a bit bizarre for some people, but patrolling the streets I used to play in as a kid. I had a choice as to whether I could go or not, because I'm from there. So you're prone to, if people know you, you're prone to being blackmailed and stuff, so. But I managed to get to go. My wife didn't know that at the time, because she didn't want me to go. Served in the First Gulf War. We were in direct support of 3RF, who were attacked by the American A-10, so we ended up staying longer in the desert for another 30 days, so we ended up enjoying the luxuries of Kuwait. Served in Bosnia, and I'll go into those in a little bit more detail later. So we were the first NATO troops into Bosnia. I have a thing about politicians that they really annoy me at times. They kind of got that one wrong. They send the troops in, the fighting troops in after the fighting's been done. And sending UN peacekeeping troops in first doesn't add up in my mind. Did 2 tours of the Falklands. I wasn't involved in the conflict, but I travelled an awful lot as well in the army. I made good use of the facilities there, so I think back to date I've done about 55 countries all in all, in and out of the forces. So yeah, nature, the nature connection. When I was 18 in the army, I was actually called gay for being a bird watcher. When I was 38, about ready to leave, I had a whole division at my disposal for a conservation day. Amazing. Times do change. One of my pride and joys was setting up the nature reserve. It was a disused gravel pit. And the Germans are really good. They're very efficient in terms of if you want to do something. I went along to this gravel pit, and I was actually inspired by another gravel pit up in Amwell in Hertfordshire, where that was set up by an ex-SAS guy and a priest. And I saw what they'd done, and I thought, wow, if they can do this, then I could do this. So I had an opportunity to do a habitat management plan on this gravel pit and actually get it off the ground and get it working. And the beauty of that whole process throughout was, I had a German friend join me later on. We actually got the hunting lobby on board, we got the water board on board, we got the local farmers on board. The only people we couldn't get were the anglers, the fishermen. They were just too interested in their own thing. But to actually get the hunting lobby involved in a conservation project was never heard of in Germany. And when we didn't do it the following year, the phone was hot as to why we weren't doing it. Was there a problem? And there wasn't actually a problem, it's just it didn't happen. But what I said to my friend Peter, what I'd like to do is have a meeting with all the officials, but not in a room, because what happens in a room is you sit there crossed armed, what are you going to give me and I'm going to give you a little back in return. Let's have a barbecue down at the lake, get some bratties on the go, get some beers, get them drunk, get them loose lipped, get them talking. And they asked loads and loads of questions. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there because I'm on Her Majesty's government go to the Gulf, you know. But they all turned up, and Germans being Germans, Pete said, "What about the politicians? Shall we invite them?" No, don't invite them. They will come anyway. And they did, uninvited. But what happened was, the farmers obviously were asking loads of questions because there was another conservation organisation there at the time, known as the ABU, and they were well established, but they were very much, we bought this area, it's now a nature reserve, you can't come in. They wouldn't let anybody in, and they had loads of nature reserves, but they became overgrown, eventually they became useless. Whereas our approach was, let's talk to the farmers and see what we can do. So a lot of conversation went on between them and Peter and the rest of it, and there was a road that ran through the nature reserve, that the area that we wanted. We needed that road moving. The farmers moved it for us at their expense, which is phenomenal. I just think that's mind-blowing. We had farmers outside phoning up, can you come and work with us because we want you to do stuff with us. So for me, I think it was all about trust. And they were quite intrigued that there was a Brit there as well being involved in all this. You know. There was one farmer, which I think is great. He had a field where we had a curlew breeding in it. Now, for where we were, that's quite rare. So we wanted to buy that field and preserve it for the curlews. He wouldn't sell it, but he knew under the law we could buy it off him for bottom dollar. And we said to him, look, you know, we can't buy this, we can kind of take it off you. And he said, well, so what am I going to do? He says, my granddad's a farmer, my dad was a farmer, I'm a farmer. This guy went on holiday for the first time in God knows how many years, phoned up every day to see how his cows were doing. Cut his holiday short because he was missing his cows, you know. So you think, you can't take this guy's field off him. So we said, okay, look, we're not going to do it. He made sure the curlew was safe, but then one day we found out there was another field that he wanted, he couldn't get, but we could. So we bought it and we swapped. And he got the best deal, you know. Well, we in terms of conservation, we got a good deal as well. So it was just really about working with them on that. And for me, that was quite powerful. I used to go there every day, 3 times a day. So morning, lunchtime and evening. And there came a period where I was having problems in my marriage. So I would come out of camp. Do I turn left and go home to an argument, or do I turn right and go to my nature reserve? I always went right. Always went right. And I'd spend an hour or two just sitting there by the bank, just going blank. You know, just being in nature, watching the deer swim the lake, black woodpecker flying over, cockatiel being chased by a merlin or whatever. And I would just spend hours and hours and hours just sitting there. And that put me in a good space for going back home, which was a difficult environment. Needless to say, I'm no longer married. So that's fine, that's the way it goes. But what I found was that here I am for the first time again, re-engaging with nature, getting back out bird watching, and I found that not only working on the nature reserve was that helpful to me, but just sitting there and enjoying what we had, because it was just on the edge of the town. Enjoying what we had, you know, watching a weasel come by with a rabbit, you know, there's just plenty to see there. So that was quite fantastic. And the interesting part about that was I built a hide to go on the nature reserve. Built it in the camp, and people had bets on whether I would get out of the garage or not. We did, and that was a first for Germany as well. You don't see many hides in Germany. You see loads here, but not many in Germany. So that was quite powerful. And there was loads of other examples in the forces where, as far as I'm concerned, the power of nature can actually have a huge influence on people. So, for example, in Canada, we were told if we see a burrowing owl, we would have to inform the Canadian authorities and they would stop the exercise and move us to the other side of the prairie. We had 1,000 square miles of prairie to train in, and that was live training. I saw 6 one night on the track. I went to the command post, reported it to the command post officer, at that grid there's 6 burrowing owls, can you phone it through? I'm not doing that, he says. So in front of the guys I said, so what you're saying to me, sir, is you're going to disobey a direct request from our Canadian host. So he had to send it. He couldn't back down. They stopped the exercise, and they moved the whole battle group to the other side of the prairie. So I like to think that's a nice, yeah, I like that. So the officers hated me, but the guys loved me. You know, we parked under a black woodpecker's nest once with our fire direction centre, spotted it, got the officer out, said, look, we need to move. Finished what we were doing, we moved. And I was amazed at how many guys who would normally kind of, well, they gave me abuse all the time. I got all sorts of names, you know. But when I approached them and said, look, we need to move because of this, this and this, and they would do it. Absolutely do it. It was just quite amazing. You know, like going into the golf. We had a meeting before we went, and the battery sat major said, anything to say? Anyone got anything to say? I said, yeah. By the end of the war, you've got to be bird watching. Get out of here, you know. By the end of the war, they were all bird watching. And I'll tell you why I know that. Because we had to stay in Kuwait because of what happened with the 3RF, they sent this officer down to give us a pep talk. And he was there with his shepherd's crook and his tam o'shanter, and the guys were sat in a half circle in front of him. And he's going, yeah, you've done great, you know, your country's proud of you. Waff, 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 waff. And I'm stood at the back of the officers and the other senior ranked. And behind him, in the distance, is a pallid harrier quartering the ground looking for food. And when the harrier went behind him and started to come out the other side, I kind of went like that. And after a while I noticed 300 guys who were sat on the ground were also going like that. When the harrier went back the other way, they all went like that. So nobody was listening to this guy. They were sat in the desert watching a bird of prey. I just love that, you know. And the word came up the line, they wanted to know what it was. So the young lad said to me, what is it, Sarge? I said, it's a harrier. Went all the way back down the line, came all the way back up. Oh, that's a plane, isn't it? You know, so typical kind of squads. But they were all at it. They'd see birds, they'd come up, they want to know, what's that bird? They'd get my book out and they'd look at it. Because they had no other distractions around them, you know. All they had was plain desert. And there's loads of life in the desert. So again, another powerful moment. And there are so many different examples of that taking place. You know, Bosnia. Okay, Bosnia. So up until then, apart from that change of direction in the army, and I'm just wondering what in your life took place that caused you to change direction. So we went off to Bosnia. Beautiful country, beautiful wildlife, redback shrike at every bush that you come across. Used to be like that here many years ago. Sadly no more, although there was some breeding in Devon quite recently. So apart from, you know, the war graves and people in minefields and all the rest of it, there was one moment that I experienced while I was there, which wasn't really nature, unless you include us as part of that, and I think we ought to include us as part of that, because I don't believe we are separate from nature, we are all connected. Me and my driver were going past this building which had basically been blitzed, and outside was a woman sat on the bank crying her eyes out, and two guys, one bloke was comforting her. They looked like brothers, and I assumed the one comforting her was her husband. Drove past, split second really. Question. Could Bosnia happen in the UK? In my mind, yes, given the right circumstances we had in Northern Ireland. Why not? So I set myself a little task. I wanted to find out what the other guys thought. So I went round and I asked pretty much everybody where I was based, could Bosnia happen in the UK? And there was one straightforward answer, no, because we're British and we're civilised. And I was horrified at this. I was like, what? Am I the only person that thinks that this could happen? But what was significant about that moment was, without me being really conscious of it, I never actually wanted to come back to this country. My kids are German, they live in Germany. I married a German woman. So I was going to stay in Germany. I speak fluent German. So everything was geared up for me to stay in Germany. I had the nature reserve. I was going to buy a house right next to it and kind of chill out with my little 15-minute nature reserve, anti-war stuff. And then just suddenly, without realising, I decided to come back here. Now, in that base where I was, I used to have a little sit spot I used to go to all the time. I used to sit by the riverbank and I could hear people calling my name. Hey, you see staff at the moment? We need staff at the moment. And I go, just like another cigarette, they'll solve the problem in a minute. They don't really need me. They can solve it themselves. They just want to pass the buck. And sure as eggs, I go back. Oh, we were looking for you. Did you solve it yet? No worries. But then, you know, like I said, I came back here and I was back here and I was like, why am I back here? I don't want to be here. I don't like this place. And so I was up in Essex in Harlow. How am I doing for time? Am I doing all right?
About 10 minutes or so.
10 minutes, okay. So basically, I was quite desperate really. I didn't know what I wanted to do and I just kind of came out the pub one night sober and I just screamed to the sky, dare I say, for heaven's sake, someone help me because I don't know what I want to do. And then things happened. The ball started rolling. I met this person and she introduced me to somebody else. And then I was set on my, if you like, my spiritual journey, my awareness about myself, learning all the lessons that I needed to learn about myself. And I'm still not having much contact with nature at this point. This was all about me discovering who I am. Who am I really? What am I about? So I lost quite a few jobs when I came back, didn't hold them down, went off to Belize and worked for Rally International, where I discovered that actually I want to work with people. So I came back. How does that look? How does that work? I haven't got a clue. So I took a year out. And in that year, I decided I would set up a school called Natural Pathways. But I didn't know how to run a business. So I thought, right, I'll do a little bit of go around a couple of schools and see how they do it. And just kind of see if I've got what it takes to kind of run a school. I used to teach survival in the army. I did my alert course, which is long range reconnaissance patrol school in the army. So I've done battlefield survival and stuff like that. Well, I went to one school, walked in, ex-SAS bloke, done the weekend, came away and thought, no, I don't want to do that. Not to be disrespectful in any shape or form, you know. It was just, I'd done that in the army and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I had a magazine called Kindred Spirit. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but there was an ad in there for a school called Trackways. So I went down to Trackways where Thomas Shawcon, he owns it and runs it. And I met Thomas, and within the first 24 hours, I kind of opened up to him and said, you know, this is the reason why I'm here. His response was, how can I help? Blimey, okay, that's cool, don't normally get that. So I attended his next course, and walking down the track, and I met Chris, hiding up a tree on a branch with his little funny shoes on at the time. I remember them because you had your toes sticking through them. What are you doing up there, mate? Get out of the way. So, and that was a cracking course. I absolutely loved that course. But it also scared me as well. And I'll tell you why it scared me. Because I'm with a group of people who I know nothing about, who are completely different to me, and yet we do have something in common. And so I was very, very curious, and I really felt like a fish out of water. And I know Chris and I spent some time sharing some stuff about that, because I believe you were curious at the time about my approach and my way of thinking, you know. But meeting these guys, I've met Phil along the way, and meeting these guys, what that's done for me, it's given me a new lease of life, a breath of fresh air, because I can be in nature, I can be who I want to be in nature and still do what I want to do, but I've got other people around me who are exploring it in completely different ways, which gives me kind of inspiration, new ideas, things to play with, and I'm able to connect with them on a different level to how I would function normally in civilian street, dare I say, because I'm a civilian myself now. So that was, for me, quite a change in my life. That's another change in direction, and it's obviously nature related. I met my partner at the time, Hannah, and she joined me in setting up Natural Pathways. And there was a period there where I was going through a real difficult time, and I actually refer to her now as my little saviour, because had she not been there, I think I would have been going in a completely different direction, and not a good one. So she needed to be there at that moment in time to help me shift in direction. So again, you know, have you had that kind of experience where you've met somebody that's caused you to just change direction? And these are not conscious decisions, really. I think you just kind of follow a natural path, if you like. So then, what happened next was completely off my radar. I ended up going to work for a rehab. My attitude then was, they're addicts, their problem, deal with it, don't want to know, not interested. I have to tell you, apart from the British Army, that was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, because it taught me so much about my own behaviour. I'm not an addict, I have smoked, I do drink, but it taught me so much about my behaviour. But more than that, what happened was I ended up taking the guys out into nature. Nurse at the time, I knew from a previous job, didn't want to give a lecture, palmed it off onto me. Took the guys out into nature, 4 or 5 sessions, they then hired me in as their nature counsellor. The beauty of what really happened next was fantastic. I knew nothing about addictions, blank canvas. They knew nothing about me, blank canvas. They didn't want to go to group process. Group process was a nightmare for them, so we went out into nature and played games. Meet a tree, a few other games. And as we played them games, particularly, in fact, initially Meet a Tree, I had 20 addicts on my own. I couldn't go into a counselling room with them without a counsellor being present, but I could take 20 addicts out into the woods on my own without a counsellor being present. So I had 20 addicts going off into the woods looking for a tree, their tree. And I'm like, God, what happens if they don't find it, or they all decide to run away? So for me, it was a lesson in trust and letting go. And then just things started to evolve. As we played the games more and more, we discovered new angles to the games, new avenues, new ways of exploring the games, and it just kept evolving and evolving. And then new games come out of that. I remember one game in particular, there was a group of guys, they were playing, taking on the role of a pack of wolves. One of them broke away and actually howled like a wolf. And when we challenged it, he realised that actually before he starts to use, that's what he does, he breaks away. He wouldn't have got that in a room within 4 walls. And the other good thing about nature in terms of the counselling side is that it is a win-win situation. You might start out with doing Meet the Tree and everyone thinks it's about finding the tree. It's not always about finding the tree. There's the journey in between. Sometimes you can go straight to it, sometimes you can go all the way around the houses. But something will happen where I can do an intervention, where we sit down with the group and we'll do a group process. And at the end of it, if that person goes, got it, metaphorically, they've just found their truth. Yeah? So it got to a stage where I could identify someone with compulsive helping, if they had compulsive helping behaviour, which you wouldn't get in a room. So there's loads of behaviours that you can nail out in nature that you won't get in a room. And you can process that. Excuse me. And the good thing about nature is, to me, in a traditional counselling situation, counsellor, client or patient, there's an imbalance. This person has the power, if you like. In nature, you're there. You're out there together on a shared journey. So you build the shelter together, you light the fire together, you look for food together, you play the game together. It's a completely different relationship. So what I look for is...
Would you say, just like a clarifying question there, that actually sets up a 3-point dynamic where you've got the person, you're the counsellor, the client maybe, and nature, and that rather than it being linear, it's always a shifting thing.
Completely, absolutely, yeah. Because what I say to it, what's happening is it's about my relationship with myself in nature, my relationship with you in nature, and my relationship with, in my case, my higher power, the creator in nature. Yeah, and that's definitely, absolutely. Without the nature element, you couldn't do it. It wouldn't be possible, really. You'd be back to that one-to-one situation. So we were able to find things and discover things which I could take back to the counsellors and say, oh, by the way, this is what happened. And I remember one occasion that I handed over this information, and they all went, oh, right, we got him now we know how to deal with him.
Okay.
But they all thought what I did was tree hugging, hippie loving stuff, you know. So, you know, I've got so many examples of how powerful that is. I could talk really all day about it. So for me that was really powerful, but something else happened as well. I got offered a place at university. I never thought I would ever go to university. At the age of 48, going to university. I've got no school qualifications. Everything I got was in the forces. So take the forces out, all I've got is a master's. They were talking Chinese and Russian at the same time as far as I was concerned. I had a rewrite on the first year, 3 rewrites on the second year, and I thought, I'm never going to do this, and I was ready to pack it in. The professor actually turned around to me when I said, look, if I'm not good enough, let me know and I'll walk. And he actually said, I've got 2 professors who want to work with you. Oh, right, okay, why? Because what you're doing is quite interesting. So we did research on meat tree, which was quite interesting. And that just spun me into a different area altogether. I thought, oh, okay, so now I can approach this subject from a different angle and look at it from different perspectives again. And it really, really is organic. It really does grow. There are just so many different angles that you can take on it. Like on the tracking side, I've worked with kids with Asperger's who are seeing tracks in the ground that you and I wouldn't see. And yet, their attention span in school is very, very limited. The teachers around them are very derogatory towards them, you know. But here they are out in nature. I mean, one kid, when I hid a member of staff away, he knew where that member of staff was before we even started tracking. So we're talking about a different level here. We did an exercise where we hid some objects. They were tuning into them and getting them, and the staff were like, "Wow, how are they doing that?" Well, okay, so there's another avenue for you to explore. Ask questions and try and seek the answers. And that's what I'm going to do this afternoon on one of the workshops. I'm actually going to try something I've never ever done before. So those of you that come on the concentric ring one, you'll get to experience that. You know, because for me it's about, okay, if I was doing this and I was this person doing this exercise, what kind of questions would they ask? Okay, I would ask that question. So how am I going to demonstrate that? Okay, I'm going to try this. And without going into too much detail, that's what I'm going to do this afternoon. I'm going to try and demonstrate how you can affect someone else's behaviour on an energetic level and manifest it into the physical. Because we all do that. Okay, so you think half an hour is a long time, it's not really, is it? So we're pretty much towards the end there. Just want to invite any questions, and please feel free to challenge me. I would like it if you do challenge me, because if you don't, then I don't feel I'm doing my job properly, and I need to stay sharp. I don't want to fall into my own trap.
Sorry, Jeff, do you notice when you're working with adults a difference in those who've had a relationship with nature when they were younger, as opposed to those who maybe lived in an urban environment and never really engaged with nature before?
Yes, there is a difference, but there isn't. An example of that would be, I've had people from the rehab come and do the workshop and say, well, I know all about nature, I lived in nature, and my dad's a farmer, and blah, blah, blah. And then they do the game, and they're like, wow, I never knew that. So the guys who actually knew nothing, I wouldn't even say they were better placed, actually, it doesn't really matter. They're both equally placed. My job, what I see is I have to pay attention to what's going on with the group and just kind of be the conductor, if you like, and allow them, watch their body language, what's going on, and then allow them to come in. But no, there isn't. There isn't, ultimately. You know, I've used musical instruments. I'm not musical at all, but I've had people tell their life story on a guitar, and other people have just connected with it and shared their life story. Wow, yeah, I remember when you did that bit on the guitar. That reminded me of when I took some cocaine or whatever, you know. And these are all possibilities for you to do an intervention of whatever type of intervention you want to do, where you can get them to express it. But you use the power of the group as well. It's not just me. If we were doing an intervention now, I'd be getting you lot to work. And I'll just be like standing here conducting. Yeah, that's a good question, thank you. Any others? Maybe you'll have a load more after the workshop or workshops. Okay, well, thank you for listening to me.
So we're going to hand over to